Good afternoon and welcome to the University of Tasmania's Island of Ideas online public lecture series. In the Field with Tasmania Climate and Marine Scientists is a short film festival jointly presented by the Australian Marine Science Association and the Australian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society as part of the National Science Week. My name is Leslie and I am the president of the Tasmanian branch of the Australian Marine Science Association. In recognition of the deep history and culture of this island, the University of Tasmania wishes to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Palawa people, and custodians of the land upon which we meet. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and to the Aboriginal people that did not make elder status, and to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community that continue to care for the country. Noting that this is in the online environment, attendees can be situated anywhere across the state, country, or across the globe. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners in those places where our audience joined us from. They cared and protected country for thousands of years. They knew this land, they lived on the land, and they died on these lands. And so I'd like to also acknowledge and honor them. We would like to say a few words about the Australian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society and the Australian Marine Science Association. The Australian Marine Science Association, AMSA, is one of Australia's oldest marine science professional organization, and for over 50 years has promoted all aspects of marine science in Australia. AMSA is dedicated to the communication amongst professionals working in fields of marine science and the dissemination of knowledge about the marine environment to the wider public. The Australian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society, AMOS, is an independent Australian society that supports and fosters interest in meteorology, oceanography, and other related sciences by providing a forum for people with a common interest and by publishing relevant material. The Society helps all those with an interest in the environment, including research workers and professionals, those who work and affected by and affects the atmosphere and oceans, and those who simply want to keep up with new findings. We would like to thank the Inspiring Tasmanian program of the state government and the University of Tasmania for their support for today's event. The University of Tasmania's Island of Ideas online public lecture series commenced last year to keep the ideas flowing during a period of which we were unable to host live public events. The program will continue in 2021 as a mixture of online and on-campus events, with the safety of students, staff, and the community still our highest priority. Each year, the university presents hundreds of lecture, forums, seminars, and workshops to nurture the ongoing learning of our students, alumni, and the wider community. Over the last 18 months, over 25,000 community members have participated in the Island of Ideas series. These are an important part of the university's role and why we are hosting forums such as this one this afternoon with National Science Week. Just a few housekeeping notes before this afternoon's forum gets underway. Your microphone, camera, chat function, and raise hand functions have all been disabled, so our speakers are not interrupted. But we do encourage you to ask questions, and this can be done anytime by typing them into the Q&A function. You'll see it on your screens. You can ask questions anonymously, and a selection will be answered during the Q&A session towards the end of the discussion. And finally, this lecture is being recorded for later access on our YouTube and SoundCloud channels. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Master of Ceremonies for today's event, Peter Pusick. Peter is a PhD student at the Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies. He studies the impacts of plastic ingestion on seabirds. This job takes him to some amazing places to conduct fieldwork. When not in the lab or doing fieldwork on far-flung tropical islands, you can find Peter surfing, hiking, spending time outdoors, and getting creative. Peter is a huge fan of Science Week and loves communicating his research to school groups and the public through interactive activities and art. So welcome, Peter.
Hi, thanks, Leslie. Thanks for having me, everybody. Happy Science Week, and I'm really excited we get to see some amazing short films today that each showcase a different aspect of what it's like to work within climate change and marine science research. I think it's really important at the moment that we do highlight and celebrate our effective science communicators, especially when we're talking about these big global issues like climate change and marine conservation. So the first of these films will help introduce you to some of my own work. It's a film called On the Shoreline, supported by Arts Tasmania and Screen Tasmania. The second is a contribution from one of our organizations, AMOS, which you just heard a little bit about then. And then the last two films are our finalists for our short film competition. So Emilianus Chiamoli and Ollie Dove. So at the end of the presentations, we invite you to discuss and address questions towards the filmmakers using that Q&A function we just spoke about. And you can submit your questions at any time during the presentations. So we'll start off with a short film around some of my work on plastic pollution in seabirds, which is very fitting given the format of today's event. Like I said, this was supported by Film Tasmania and Arts Tasmania. And it's part of a body of work by Tess Campbell and Sam Mountford, two visual artists based here in Lutruwita, Tasmania. It tells the story of some of my fieldwork mishaps through the lens of the lab work. So oftentimes when we're out in the field collecting data, that's a lot of hard work, but then we need to go and do more hard work back in the lab. And so the work doesn't stop. This film is to be completed early next year. So we're very lucky to be able to have a short 10-minute cut.
Okay. Hi Sam, how's it going? This is the meditation exercise at the beach because I thought that was fitting. So hopefully the sound of the waves doesn't mask the sound of my voice. I'm going to, just chill. What was it? Say whatever comes to my head for the next 20 minutes.
I was heading out one day with a friend of mine to collect some data for her research. We're driving out to this smaller island off of a place called Bruny Island. We have to go out late because we need low tide. So we start driving out and we catch the last ferry to the island. And we're on our way and it's bucketing down rain. It's the most rain I have ever seen in my life. And we stop at this pub and we're thinking this is a real problem because if it keeps raining like this, we're probably not going to be able to get to the island. But we're sitting at the pub having a pizza and a beer, and eventually the rain calms down, so we head back to the car and start driving again. And we get to this cliff because you have to get to the edge of the island, get to this cliff, go down, and then cross. And you can only cross at low tide. On the other side of the crossing is the other island. So we wait until about 9:30 at night, because that is when low tide happens. We're at the top of this cliff and we start heading down, and my friend, she has a head torch on, and it's still raining, so it's still cloudy, and we can't see the moon or the stars, it's just the head torch. And she has this long orange pole that she's testing the ground with as we walk, so we don't slip down this goat track on the edge of the cliff. And then we get to the bottom, and we're hit with this stench of bull kelp. It's rotting bull kelp. And we start crossing. Step into this water, freezing water, middle of winter, and at this point I realized how incredibly unprepared I was. I'm meant to be wearing gumboots, plastic overalls, head torch, but I'm in skinny jeans, Doc Martens, and no head torch. My friend, she's fine, she's wading through fine, but I'm sinking into this kelp, and my shoes are filling with icy water, and I'm getting wet all through, and my jeans are getting tighter, but I keep walking, wading through, and on one side it's not too bad because that's the bay, but on the other side is the ocean. It's more exposed, bigger sprays, bigger waves, but we go through, we make it to the other side, and there's a cliff that we have to go up to get to the island proper. So we start climbing, and it's fairly protected till you get to the top, and then that's when the wind hits again, and you remember you're in the storm. And my friend says, "Right, it's time to go to the first pitfall trap, because that's where the data is to collect." We start walking towards the trap, and I have to walk really carefully because the shearwater, they burrow, and the ground's really soft, they aerate it. That means that if you step in the wrong place, you might sink through the ground, which is okay for me, but I might step on one of the shearwater or one of their eggs. And even if I don't, I'm still exposing the burrow to predators. And you might think, what predators are on this island? We start looking around and we see golden eyes in the darkness. I think at first of these cats, because that's a real problem, because feral cats, they destroy the wildlife. They eat animals they shouldn't. And then we realize it's possums. Strange because it's grassy here, there's not many trees, but nevertheless. And I start thinking, well, how did these possums get here? It was so difficult for us to get here. How did they make it here? What do they eat? Are they trapped here? So we're there at the pitfall trap, and collecting data for her research, and I start thinking about my research. And I start thinking about the seabirds and how they bring nutrients from the ocean to the land, and how they go and they eat fish and squid, and then they fly back to the land, and their poo, their guano, is filled with those nutrients, and then that feeds the land. And then when that disappears, because we've been to lots of different kinds of these islands, and we've seen when the seabirds stop doing that, or when they disappear, the islands themselves, they start to fade away. The plants, they die because they don't have those nutrients anymore. And then when the plants are gone, the animals on the island, the land animals, they're not long for the world either. So then I'm just thinking, when we lose the seabirds, to the land, and how they go, plants, they die because they don't have those nutrients.
Sorry about that, team. So that was our first video in our series. Hopefully you can all hear and see me again. So our next video is by Dr. Kathy Allen. I'll hand over to Kathy Allen to describe a little bit about what she does and about what the next film is about.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy. I'm with Geography, Planning and Spatial Sciences, and I work with past climates. And to do this, I collect tree rings from old trees. And of course, in Tasmania, we have some excellent candidates. King Billy pine, pencil pine, Huon pine and celery top pine. So this film basically records a little bit of our trip in 2019 down to southern Tasmania. And in this trip, we're collecting a lot of material from mainly dead King Billy. All right, now, just got to try to sort out the sound.
use the satellite phone, just in case. Now we're in the chopper, it's too late to go back.
Now, happy campers, so far, take in the breathtaking scenery of southern Tasmania as we fly into the site. There's Federation Peak.
Now these little white sticks you can start to see, these are some of the dead trees that we're going to core. So as the chopper leaves, we eye off some of the dead trees. These ones have probably been dead for less than 200 years. So these are really youngsters. It's important at the start of the field trip to document the names and number of field crew, just in case someone's missing at the end. Next day, no roosters, thankfully. And now before we go in, we're just going to have a little bit of a coring lesson. We've had a long and arduous journey from camp through rain, sleet and snow to get to this tree, as you can see.
I've got about a 500 mil increment bore. First thing I'm going to do is take the spoon out. Sometimes you can stick it up in the tree like that and let it hang. There's a good spot too, but somewhere you're not going to lose it, somewhere you're not going to step on it like I did yesterday. Pull the actual corer out. You lift up the little handle on the handle, stick the corer in there, slot that back down, and you're ready to go. As you're doing this, you want to try to press your body in like this as you turn it. You just go like this. You start to turn it until those threads catch. Just turn it, and usually after a couple turns, it'll hold itself.
Right, that's enough of that. Check out Precipitous Bluff and the south coast. Now we're giving the student a coring lesson while we can still stand upright, because it won't be long before we're crawling. But at the end of that crawling through the bush, there are rewards. We're mostly coring dead trees, but we core a few live trees to calibrate our record against the modern climate record. Now we have the highlight of Andy's first day in the field, a beautiful long core with lovely tiny rings. And then we core more dead trees, and we do that all day. Now some of this prickly muck is scoparia, your best friend. Right, and after that, it's dinner time. Thanks, Harry. It was a great dinner. Next morning, the weather starts. This is what it was like for most of the trip. Wet and foggy, but certainly not miserable. This tree is a very important tree. It marks the start of the toileting area. So we cored it, of course. Time to get going, to find some ancient dead King Billy, all in the name of science. Everyone's still a happy camper, despite the fact it's wet feet all day and scoparia all day. But we're all still having a good time. Just look at John. And here comes that scoparia again.
This never stops. Hey, John.
Oh, hey-o.
Now, strange things can happen to the mind when you've been away for too long, but the best remedy is to keep coring, keep finding long dead trees, and keep taking notes on waterproof paper. Sometimes the corers really get stuck, and this is when you use a neat trick called the Spanish windlass. But you do have to ensure that you've got a good dampener weight on the rope, and this is for safety reasons.
Yep, perfect.
There's some beautiful things out there besides trees. And then there are more trees. Now this must be the saddest, loneliest tree I've ever seen.
So this is our lunch on the last day. It's a little rainy, just a little, but we're all here having some soggy cheese and salami extraordinaire. It's lovely. You can see the notebook's all swollen up. It's a nice little clearing. All, what, 3 square meters of it. So we're wet.
Drinking and coring at the same time really doesn't work. Well, it looks like time to go home. Everyone's tired and wet.
This is my tent. You can hear the rain. It's been raining like this since this morning. We went out. I'm completely soaked. There's all our samples. It's just a mess. But you can listen to the rain.
Next morning, drying out.
Mold growing on my clothes. The dry clothes that were in the bottom of my day pack got wet. They've been sitting in there for a week, and now they've got mold growing on them.
Now it's time to introduce the international crew. We've got a bit of diversity, but there's clearly a bit of work to do. There's John from Tucson, Nathan, the American expat from Queensland, Harry, the Victorian, and Andy, the shy Englishman. I'm the Tasmanian boss lady of this motley crew. What are these guys doing? It's clearly time to go home.
I'm gonna put my name to this. Take it away, Andy.
Now we have one last core before the helicopter comes. He obviously hasn't smelt us. It's off home while there's a gap in the weather. We've caught about 100 trees to use in our project. The chronology now extends back to 46 BCE. That's more than 2,000 years ago. So it's goodbye to the Southern Ranges, which is a very special place. So next time you see dead trees standing or lying on the ground, think about how old they might be and what they could tell you about past climate.
Thank you so much for that, Kathy. That was excellent. What a wonderful adventure it looked like. And gosh, walking through that scapario really makes you think that Land is a bit of a walk in the park. It was a great film because it was a good example of what we were after in terms of short film entries. We wanted to see what life was really like in the film, in the field, all the challenges that came along the way, and just a little snapshot into daily life as a field biologist. So next we'll move along to Emiliano's wonderful film. Emiliano is a research fellow at Remote Sensing here at the University of Tasmania. Emiliano, I'll get you to provide a few quick words about your wonderful film that we're about to see.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Peter, for the intro. So yeah, I'm Emiliano, postdoctoral research fellow here at the University of Tasmania, and today I will be showing you a little bit about a video I made during lockdown some 3 months a while ago. So it's about light and life beneath the ice, beneath Antarctic sea ice to be specific. For those who doesn't know, sea ice is just this massive, huge aerial extent around the Antarctic continent, like millions of square kilometers. And while it might look just devoid of life from the surface, just, white and dead and stuff, actually beneath the ice is thriving with life and beautiful things that I hope you'll enjoy in the video. It's a 7-minute trip underneath the ice, and it was taken during actual 2 field expeditions in 2018 and 2019 at Cape Evans, Antarctica. And while you'll see a lot of crazy creatures around, the actual objective of the field expedition was to look at sea ice algae, which is like the plants of the under ice, exactly the plants. And we had this massive hole in the tent where a lot of these creatures were surfacing, and it was kind of like a surprise box every day. And so I got very passionate about these creatures, filming them and documenting them. And yeah, that's where the lockdown hit. Spent a lot of time at home and made this short video. Hope you'll enjoyed it, and I'll try to share, and if it works, just share screen. Here we go. Share sound. Without further ado.
Let there be light. Since ancient times, people believed that light was with God, or that light was God himself. In light, the origin of all kinds of life, human beings thought they had seen God. What exactly is the nature of light, which can be changed into electric energy and cause chemical reactions? Let's see in this experiment. Inside common and ordinary light, where is this mysterious power hidden? of light, we can find many mysterious phenomena like this.
To understand the wave properties of light, let's first look at the behavior of waves on the surface of water.
Let us classify the kinds of light by wavelength. As for the energy of light, the shorter the wavelength, the higher the energy.
To maintain a constant testing cycle, I simulate daylight at all hours. So you may be confused about the passage of time. The point is,
In this experiment, we use a photon-counting image acquisition system.
I'm sorry, I don't know why that went off. Just an interesting science fact. Enjoy this next test. I'm going to go to the surface. It's a beautiful day out. If it makes you feel any better, it's just a data point. Well...
Thanks so much, Emiliano. That was fabulous.
Oh, no, thanks, you guys.
Quite a alien world underneath the sea ice, isn't it?
Yeah, not very informative, to be honest, but I hope it's just engage you a little bit and make you curious about what's down there. It made me curious, and that's it.
Absolutely. If you have any questions unrelated to the filmmaking process, if you want to ask anything about this, make sure you drop it in the Q&A below, and we'll come back together and chat about that later. So already we've had a real diversity of different takes on how to describe fieldwork using a short film. Our final winner is Ollie Dove. Ollie Dove is a PhD student at the Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies. She's a marine ecologist. And Ollie, I'll get you to jump on screen and just give us a quick overview of the film you're about to show.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter, and thanks to everyone that tuned in today and for the organising committee. It's really great and fun to be here. So I am Ollie Dove, and appropriately for my name, I study the behaviour of birds. So I'm a PhD candidate at the Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies here in Salamanca. And I study the foraging behaviour of little penguins and short-tailed shearwaters, aka muttonbirds, that forage in Storm Bay waters here in Tassie. And what that involves is that I go out to Wedge Island, which is an uninhabited island west of Nubina off the Tasman Peninsula. And I go there twice a year for between 2 weeks and 5 weeks at a time. And I attach biologgers to the seabirds. They take them to sea, collect the data, which I then study. And obviously up to 5 weeks on an island, when it's just me and 2 or 3 volunteers, you've got a lot of spare time. So we tend to explore the island and have some fun. And for ethical reasons, I can't film the actual hands-on work with the seabirds because we take them out of their burrows to work with them. And so obviously we want to be handling them for as little time as possible and just release them back. So I made a film showing what we do sort of outside that work, how we pass the time, because a lot of it is night work. So what do we do in the day? And also you may spot a familiar face because Peter is actually one of the volunteers that comes out with me to the island. So without further ado, I will share my screen and fingers crossed, the wonders of technology work for us today. Share the sound. Okay, so I hope you enjoy. Let's take a look. As part of my PhD, I travelled to the island to study 2 seabird species, short-tailed shearwaters and little penguins. And this is my home from home.
Good morning and welcome to my humble home. Today we're going to be having a look at the life of a marine ecologist in the field, and it begins every day for the past month waking up in this lovely little tent.
I live on Wedge Island for between 2 and 5 weeks at a time, along with my volunteers who come to help, and I wouldn't be able to do my work without them.
Hiya.
Our campsite includes our gazebo, where we eat and work, our hut for equipment, our washing up station, the rubbish and recycling corner, and then you may be wondering where the bathroom is. Well, you're actually looking at it, as the ocean doubles up as our toilet and shower. And it's safe to say that most people aren't envious of that bit of field work. Each morning begins with getting the campsite ready for the day, and you may notice how gloriously beautiful the weather is. But it's not always like that on Wedge, and battling the wind is not an uncommon way to start a day. Like the time I woke up to see the gazebo almost flying away to Oz. And it gets very wet on the island as well sometimes, but usually this is followed by a pot of gold rainbow. But today we have blue skies. You end up feeling quite relaxed when you're on the island because everything takes longer than normal. Even just boiling some water for a cup of coffee takes a long time because you usually have to refuel the stove. Because the island is completely uninhabited from people except for us, we have to bring all of our supplies with us, either at the start of a trip or on volunteer changeover days. This is me packing the food for a month-long trip and doing my best to resist the urge to start eating all of the snacks. And planning the food is probably the hardest part of the job, as you don't really know what your co-workers are going to enjoy eating. And a good tip for being a scientist that works out in the field is to be as non-fussy with food as possible, as you often have to get quite inventive with your meals, as the weeks tick by and you have fewer ingredients to work with, and you do your best to make the same meals that you eat every day more and more interesting.
Welcome to Dove's Cooking. Today for breakfast we are serving you up some porridge with some almonds and some other nuts and all the sultanas that Noemi didn't want to eat. And we've also got, what have we got in there? Some random vegan Nutella that was left over and solidified, but we've also got some hot chocolate powder, and it may look a little bit like gruel, but it actually tastes better than it looks. No, it's actually okay.
As important as taking enough food is taking enough water. There's no drinking water available on the island, so each morning I usually refill the jerry cans we use for cooking and drinking, as well as do a water count to make sure we're still on track to have enough water before the next supply drop. And as with no drinking water, there's no showers or baths, so hygiene is as minimum as you'd expect, with occasional dips in the salty sea being the closest we can to being clean. I personally like to plait my hair back because I find it reduces the number of twigs that end up in there.
And then after breakfast comes data entry and studying, like how these guys are doing right now. Look at these hard biologists at work.
Later on in the morning, and there's usually odd jobs to do around the island, such as hiking up to the peak to download data from my weather station. And this weather station can record wind, rain, sun, pressure, and environmental variables as these are just one part of the jigsaw behind studying animal behaviour. And we're back to eating. You may be thinking that all we seem to do is eat, and you're probably correct. It's not easy being a field zoologist, and keeping up your energy levels is super important. But we do have to make sure our food is still edible before we start a meal. And when I come back from each trip to the island, I always find eating my first slice of bread super exciting because I haven't had to check if it's moldy. By now, you're probably wondering why you haven't actually seen any of us work with the seabirds. Well,
My study species return to their nests at nighttime, so all of our data collection work takes place after dark. This means we can hang out with the other island inhabitants until nightfall, which includes other birds like turbochooks and wedge-tailed eagles, as well as the seals that live in a haul out on the other side of the island. We do take our time to relax though, which includes keeping up our fitness regimes, and there's nothing quite as relaxing as island yoga. But back to eating, and dinner signifies the start of the real work. You may also have asked yourself, if Ollie's a marine ecologist, how come she's not filming in the water at all? Well, there's loads of different ways to study a seabird's behaviour, and it's obviously not particularly easy to follow them into the water. So I attach small biologgers onto the birds, which they can take to sea, record their behaviour, and bring back to me to study. The seabirds go out to forage for fish and other yummy snacks in the daytime and return to their chicks after sunset. We only study the adults, so the lights you see here, if you squint really carefully, are us working throughout the bird colony at nighttime. My favourite part of fieldwork is watching the shearwaters come home each night. Across half an hour, the sky becomes filled with more and more of them as they flock back in the thousands. Short-tailed shearwaters can go on foraging trips for up to 3 weeks at a time, and they reach all the way down to Antarctic waters, so it's epic to watch them come back from such an incredible commute. The penguins, however, have a somewhat less impressive commute, and as non-flying birds, they hop and skip over the rocky shores back to their nests. My project involves monitoring a few individual birds in particular, so we do regular checks to see if they've come home yet, and we wait at the base between those checks. Often, you'll find shearwaters spending time chilling on bushes above ground. Or if you look carefully, you may find a penguin or two nestled below in a nook. Some teenager penguin chicks get quite confident and used to scientists being around. And so as we're walking through the colony, we actually have to dodge them as they run up at our feet. Other chicks have a more blunt approach for showing how they feel about their scientists in the colony. And given the thousands of birds flying above, it's not unusual to receive a gift or two from the sky. As the night goes on, our burrow checks have longer gaps between each one, so we return to the gazebo to reduce disturbance for the birds and sometimes to hide from the rain. To pass the time, we play cards, drink hot chocolate, read, or hang out with some nighttime friends that have come to say hello. These include moths, the Ricali water rats slinking around, or some insects like this praying mantis.
Is she looking at me? She's licking her fingers. It's so cute.
And the occasional eight-legged friend, of course. You wouldn't expect anything less from fieldwork in Australia.
They get a little bit bigger than that.
And sometimes even my study species pops by to the gazebo for a hello.
Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Thanks so much for sharing that one with us, Ollie. I was going to say, who's that mysterious bearded man, but you gave my identity away. It actually makes me feel very nostalgic watching that that film. Very raw and real the way things played out on Wedge Island with you. I'll invite back our video presenters, if you will, to join me on Zoom, and we'll have a little Q&A discussion about maybe some of the reasons why you went about filming things in the way you did, and then also about the research that's taking place. Remember, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A down below. So I might just start with saying, like, those were absolutely amazing films, all three of them. They were all very unique. I noticed, Ollie, you used a lot of stop motion or time lapses to film yours. and Emiliano clearly has a way with the camera underwater. Can you each tell us about, did you go into your fieldwork knowing you wanted to collect some film and potentially do something like this, or was this kind of stitched together? Ollie, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I can go first. So outside of my PhD, I actually really love science communication and doing this kind of thing. So I'm part of a radio and podcast show called That's What I Call Science. And partially for that and for other sort of short videos that I make, I won a grant last year, which enabled me to buy a GoPro in order to create some films for some teacher friends back home, because I'm from the UK, and they were in and out of lockdown, and students are they're always online, but it can get hard when you're just stuck indoors all the time. So I wanted to be able to broadcast or show them the flora and fauna of Tasmania. So I applied and I won the grant award. And so going into my field trip, I knew that I wanted to collect footage like this. And I actually wanted to I came up with the idea, I wanted to do one video in particular as to what it's actually like to be a zoologist out in the field. So when this event then I heard about it, I was like, oh, that's so perfect, because then it was like the perfect opportunity to then give me a deadline or a specific aim to work towards.
Fantastic. Kathy, I really enjoyed your film. It made me feel like I was like in the deep southwest, or I was hiking the overland. It certainly felt cold. So not envious of the wet conditions there. Obviously Wedge Island was nice and sunny. I was helping Ollie. Walk us through, I guess, how you stitched together that film there. Was it an example of, I guess, what AMSA and AMOS was looking for this competition?
I suppose it ended up a bit that way, but when we went into the field, we wanted to capture a little bit about the field work, because the project was funded by National Geographic. So they like video, photographic assets and so on. So that was the main reason, because I'm pretty useless with remembering to take photos, but my co-workers were excellent at prodding me. And it's just really nice to get a little bit of an idea of what it's actually like out there in the field. And most of my field trips seem to be wet, but we still have a lot of fun. But everyone dives into their sleeping bags fairly early, because it does get pretty cold. Certainly that trip we got quite cold and wet.
Fantastic. And Emiliano, there's a lot of underwater footage. That's not you diving under the sea ice.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's a good point. So it's all started, it's kind of a side project. All these creatures and jellyfish is not really what we were looking for, but we had this tent and this massive hole in the ice, which is like, you can imagine you're in this tent and this presence of this 2 by 2 meters hole and 2 meters fixed ice. Just during working, we were just getting these little creatures coming up surface, and it's just, I found them amazing. And as I said, just started filming them. So it wasn't really part of the science itself. It was just like a hobby, which we started while we were there together with my supervisors as well. A good free time enjoyment. And some of them are filmed on the water, but most of them are actually filmed just nearby the hole. So it looks like we are diving, but it's just a macro lens camera and a lot of light sources, because it's pretty dark inside the tent. So most of them is filmed actually just near the surface. So we scoop them with a big acrylic glass vase, and they put them next to the hole. We fill them, and then we put them back into the water. And that's it. So that's the way we film it a little bit. There is some ROV footage, as you saw. But yeah, most of it's near the surface.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for walking us through, I guess, the creative process behind stitching those films together. I've got a question from our Q&A. It says, thanks for the great films. Could you all share a weird or funny thing that happened during your fieldwork? I might start same order. Ollie, if you'd like to go first.
Yep. Sure. Just saw the question pop up and I was trying to think what to say. So I've got a story. It's now after lunchtime, so I think it's okay to share. But essentially on Wedge Island, there was this one evening where we were up in the colony and we looked down at sea and there was bioluminescence along the entire shoreline, as in I've never seen that much bioluminescence ever anywhere. It was incredible and it was being brought in by waves. It looked like two Aquamans were fighting under the water in Atlantis. It was incredible. So after we finished the work for the evening, we went down to the shoreline, and Wedge is very rocky on the shoreline where you get onto the island, which is a good thing because it doesn't look particularly hospitable, which keeps the birds safe from the public because nobody really wants to land there. But this rocky shoreline, so we went over it and we were playing with the bioluminescence in our hands and we were holding it and it was incredible. It was so magical. It was probably one of the just pure wonders with nature that I've ever had. However, I went back to my tent and I then got ready for bed and I could smell something and I was like, I don't understand what this smell is. I'm surrounded by over 20,000 birds, pairs of birds, and I know the smell of bird poo, of bird feces very well. And so I'm like, to the point where I could tell that this was it was a poop smell, but it was not a bird poop smell because that is a smell I know real well. And I was like, I just don't understand. It smells like a dog has been in here. I just don't get it. And so I searched everywhere and then I realized and I looked at my hiking boots and unfortunately on Wedge, as I said in the video, there's no toilet. The ocean is the toilet. So you tend to do your business within the shoreline so that within a rock gap so that the sea deals with it. But unfortunately, in our rush to get out to the bioluminescence, we'd sort of gone to the same sort of toilet spot. And what I could smell back in my tent was the result of one of our lunches that day. So yeah, fieldwork is not glamorous, but it was still magical, still wonderful.
That's absolutely fantastic. I was trying not to laugh as soon as you started that story because that is one of the first things you told us on Wedge, one of the first stories. You said how magical that whole experience was, but then be warned.
Watch where you step at nighttime.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, hilarious. Kathy, can you top that? Do you have a wonderful fieldwork mishap or misadventure?
This trip was pretty tame in that respect, and no, I can't top it. But I suppose things like Nathan's mouldy clothes, we all thought was very funny, except Nathan. And the other thing, I think on the last evening, that was the day where it poured and poured all day. So we're wet through, we've got waterproofs on, we've got several layers of thermals and so on, but we're sopping wet. So we were shoving our dinner down pretty quickly because all we wanted to do was get into the warm tents because we weren't quite hypothermic, but we were heading that way. And you've got to have dessert up to main course in the bush. And so that particular evening, we just threw our plates away, hoping that the animals would lick them clean so we wouldn't have to wash them. And we just left them out while we raided the chocolate. So that's about as entertaining as we got, I think.
And did they get cleaned by the wildlife?
No, even the wildlife didn't come out. It was too cold. So that was a bit unfortunate. But there were a lot of other very funny moments, like when someone treads in a creek or a waterhole or a bog that's deeper than they expected and so on. And Harry singing at sunrise each morning. And this is December, so it's the longest day, so sunrise is pretty early to get us out of bed. So there are a lot of really good moments.
Yeah, and it's those little moments that keep you going during the fieldwork too, laughing at someone else's expense if they've fallen into a bog or if their clothes are mouldy and they're going to smell for the rest of the trip. It somehow lifts morale for everybody else, which is always good. And also good to know that there are no fairies out there that will come and do my chores for me if I leave things overnight. Emiliano, any final interesting?
Yeah, sure. If I'm allowed, I would like to share one screen. This is, I wanted, can you guys see, can everybody see?
Oh, that's so cute.
This is the ice hole that I was referring to before. So we have this massive 2 by 2 meters ice hole, and this is Lambert the Seer, aka Lambi. She thought that the hole is not ours, but it's hers. So we had it in the spot like pretty much every day, and not interrupting, but sometimes we want to deploy stuff, and she's always there. Sometimes she also fought with the instrument because they're very territorial. They think it's their hole is this and stuff. So it was quite an interesting dynamic with Lambert. Everyone learned to love her because it's always the same seal. And the fun fact is like, we had this Czech colleague who is always very serious and very hard, but he was talking to the seal all the time like he was her own pet at some stage, how are you doing and stuff. And I just remember this scene when the Lambert just pop up the face and blow up a massive amount of snot in his face. and then all the seriousness of this guy, which some people in the audience might know him, was quite a reaction that I'll remember forever. So I just big thanks to Lambi because it's just made the fieldwork way more interesting and entertaining.
Oh, fabulous. And just to confirm, is that a Weddell seal?
Yes. Not a seal expert, but yes. Yeah, here's another pictures, just if you can see it as well. I don't know. That's where we deployed the instruments. That's the seal, the Lambert, which she didn't like the instrument at all, and sometimes he was hitting it, making up for some action moments. So yeah, that's it. That's Lambert to everyone. Big part of the fieldwork.
Lambert, what a legend. That photo almost doesn't look real, does it? I mean,
she looks pretty angry, angry if you look at it. She's like, what are you doing on this hole? Anyway, that's it for me.
Oh, thanks so much for showing those videos and those photos, Emiliano. That's great. And actually, I think that's a really great question because the film that I showed actually came about from telling a funny fieldwork mishap. I was walking out to this island and had realized I'd forgotten all my field gear. And so I walked out in Doc Martens and skinny jeans and no head torch, and the hail was coming in sideways. And those wonderful artist friends of mine had taken that and turned it into a bit of a different tone of story that sort of looks at, the impact of seabed declines on islands. So yeah, share those funny stories because there's definitely a story to tell in them. A couple of specific questions. For Kathy, when you are using those drills into the trees, does that leave a distinctive mark on the tree? And does it harm live trees, or do they produce any growth? I guess what I'm wondering is, if I go walking in the Southwest, will I be able to find any telltale signs that Kathy and her team have been here?
Well, you won't find the telltale signs, I'm pretty sure. The holes are very small. We're using a 5mm core. Well, it takes a 5mm diameter piece of wood out. The actual core itself will put about a 1 centimetre diameter hole in the tree, and it's very hard to check where or see where that is unless you really know what you're looking for. I will just reiterate that nearly all the trees we caught on that trip were dead. We had a permit to collect a small number of cores from a limited number of living trees. The work that has been done on living trees to check whether the coring damages them has come up with no, it doesn't have a major impact. But what you will see, if you were to cut the tree down, which obviously we don't do, you would see staining around the core hole where the tree has reacted chemically to protect itself. And conifers, so the things like Tasmanian huon pine, kingmilli, pencil pine and celery top, they're very good at setting up their defences, so what we call compartmentalising the injury. Things like eucalypts aren't so good, but we don't tend to use eucalypts much because they have some issues with putting on annual rings. So not all trees have annual rings. So there haven't been any formal studies on the Tasmanian trees, but when you go out in the bush and you know that you've been to that site and caught it before, I've never seen any evidence that the tree's been negatively affected by coring. So, and certainly the scientific evidence elsewhere says that it doesn't have an impact. And I suppose the other thing is, if you were to think about these trees have been standing for 300, 500 or 1,000 years, they get their tops blown off, branches drop off. So they're much bigger injuries than a small core injury.
Fantastic. Yeah, amazing, the life of plants. I think that's made me appreciate maybe trees a bit more, understanding that, you know, not all of them produce those rings every year. And yeah, they have these amazing life cycles and can tell us so much about past environments. A question for Ollie. I wanted to know, our audience wants to know, are the penguins and shearwaters on Wedge Islands fixed to that location? Do they move around, and how do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's 500 breeding pairs of little penguins and 25,000 breeding pairs of shearwaters on Wedge Island. So once you've put out a biologger on one bird out of 25,000 shearwaters, you kind of want to make sure you can find them again. So yes, they do. They are fixed in a sense that they always come back to the same burrow. And they actually come back to the same colony yearly. So it's a bit different for penguins and shearwaters. Penguins, as they can't fly, everyone knows that about penguins, they always live on Wedge Island, and the adults go out to sea to feed, normally just on day trips, sometimes up to 3 days or maybe a week, but they come back to their chicks and the same burrow. With the shearwaters, they're awesome. They're not a big bird. They're quite small, and yet in the off season, in the non-breeding season, they migrate all the way up to past Japan, to Bering Sea and back. And when they're breeding on Wedge Island, so they always return to the same colony, which is impressive alone when you're commuting to and from Japan for your holiday. But when they're living on Wedge Island, they alternate between doing short foraging trips, so foraging meaning looking for food, and long foraging trips. So the short foraging trips are the ones I study, and they're the ones that take place around the southeast Tasmanian coastline and in Storm Bay, and they last for up to a week at a time, normally 3 days, 3 to 7 days. But the long foraging trips, they can go for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and they get down to Antarctica and back, which for a bird that big to get down to Antarctica and back quicker than one of our ships do, it's incredible. And there's different ways that you can identify your bird. So with shearwaters banding, you can put the little metal bands on their leg, and then they keep them for life. But you obviously don't want to do that unless you're going to keep using the same bird, because that band is with them for life. So there's other ways, sort of with a bit of tape on their back or a bit of nail polish, obviously non-toxic nail polish. So you try and think of creative ways that are the most ethical one, that you can identify your bird when they're back, but then have the lowest level of impact on them.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I love just the idea of these tiny little animals traveling all the way down to Antarctica and things like that. And I also love the image of them doing that with a cute little bit of nail polish on their feet. Just for a bit of clarity, the biologgers, or these tracks you're attaching to them, could you explain those to our audience? Does it ping a signal and then send it to your laptop, or do you need to get those back?
Yeah, so biologgers, you can get, there's lots of different types. I should have brought some up from my desk today to hold up actually. But the ones I use, they don't send the data to me. So you can get ones, you can get satellite tags that upload the data to a satellite, and then you don't have to retrieve them. So if they're lost at sea, you can't use the device again, but you still get the data. But the ones that I use, I do have to get them back. So I do have to see the bird again. And it's also better for the bird because eventually the tag would fall off them anyway. And when I say fall off, the way it works is that, so biologgers are maybe about that big, and we attach them onto the back, slightly different location depending on penguin or shearwater, but it's done with this thing called Tessa tape and a few layers of feathers. So it's sort of, I'm there with my tweezers, sort of this delicate balance, and we put it in a location that's going to be as aerodynamically or hydrodynamically least impactful. So it sort of makes them still as streamlined as possible, because you don't want to study a bird behavior that in doing so affect the bird behavior, and you obviously don't want to do anything that's going to be a detriment to the bird. So we try and put them as streamlined as possible. But yeah, I do have to get them back, and they're also very expensive. So I have two types of tags. One of them records just the GPS locations, and they cost about $80. The other one, my main one that I use for my work, it records GPS locations, the pressure, so I can work out where in the water column the birds are when they're diving, and it records really high dimensional accelerometry data. So that's recording the movement on a 3-axis, and they cost $1,600 each, roughly. So the technology that we want to use again. Yeah. So you want that back.
Fabulous. Now, one of the things I was thinking about as we watched those films is obviously, this is a part of our research, and a big thing that scientists do is publish perhaps a thesis or a paper, from the data we collect. But Emiliano, I heard that there was actually a paper that came out of this short film of yours. Could you maybe talk to that a bit?
Sorry, Peter, come again. I was reading the question on the question and answers.
So your short film, you uploaded it, and you had a paper come out of...
Yeah. It was just recent. It's actually quite a coincidence that it's just these days. This was some people from other institutes studying jellyfish, because actually I have no idea about jellyfish and ctenophores. It's not my field. And so I had this video online for some months, and they came out and contacted me and said that there hasn't, several of these jellyfish and things haven't been recorded since early 900s. So there is only records of, there was only drawings back in the days, and so at least 5 of them, it's the latest records was 909 or something like that. And so there was drawings about them, and so they made this paper, which I just helped providing the data set. And the good thing is that these data sets, they, beyond just the identification and the taxonomic purpose of keeping records, is they will serve the purpose, all this imagery, videography and photography. We set up a data set to serve the purpose of automatic detection and through machine learning and all these kind of things. So it's just accumulating information about them through videos and images, and their purpose of these researchers is making these algorithms and these videos so they can recognize them automatically, right? So people, they don't want to send people all the time down there diving on stuff, but if you have station monitoring all the time and taking pictures and videos, and on ROVs, you can have automated stuff eventually, which is the goal.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I think that just speaks again to the reason why we should be trying to record and document aspects of these beautiful places that we're privileged to go as scientists, because there might be something hiding in there that we don't pick up on, but some jellyfish expert on the other side of the world might. So
yeah, exactly, good point. Yeah.
And so to film those jellyfish, were they easy to capture on film? Or did you have to take those out of the water?
Some of them, you're just doing straight in. Some of them you had to fish them, and some of them were hard. I mean, they're actually not that motile. They don't really realize what's going on. So you just have this big acrylic glass thing. So you just take the massive. They don't even realize. You put them outside for a bit. So it wasn't really that hard. But some of them, they were quite big, and you can't grab them. So you just fill them over there, and that's it. Sometimes you need to put the hand down to scoop the things, and you realize that you can only have your hand in the water for less than probably 10 seconds, and then you start losing the senses. So that's probably the hardest way. And of course, you need amazing assistants, like patients of my supervisor, which I thanks a lot, helping with the illumination and things, even if he wasn't part of the job. So really thanks to Vanessa, which I don't know, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm also seeing from these films is it takes a team of people to achieve these fieldwork.
Yeah, definitely. Like all the it's also their patience, because we are working and there was a new critter coming out, and I was like, stop everything. There is something new coming out of the ice hole, and like we don't have this on our records, and everyone's like, fuck, here we go again. And then and so I especially admire their patience. Which is pretty good, even if it wasn't real part of the real work, right? So yeah.
And Kathy, speaking of patience, how long would it normally take to hike into or walk into where you were studying in that film? And is that the reason you took the helicopter, because it is just so remote?
It's not well, I don't feel it's incredibly remote. Other people might disagree. It probably takes, because I haven't walked all the way in there before, 4 to 5 days, probably 4 days, taking it leisurely. However, the reason we took the helicopter is we're carrying equipment. So, I mean, an individual core itself doesn't weigh much, but of course, if you accidentally break it, you've got nothing else. So you're taking like a whole armoury of these things, plus your usual food and so on, and lots of chocolate and certain adult beverages. So this all adds significantly to the weight. So I think we probably each would have been carrying 35 plus kilos in, because the other thing I always take in situations like that, you've got to take a really full detailed first aid kit. You need excess fuel in case the chopper can't get back in to pick you up for a few days. The extra corers. I even had an extra tent, which we did actually use. So extra flies, all this kind of thing. So it sort of makes the helicopter kind of necessary unless you've got a big band of Sherpas, otherwise known as students who knew no better.
And on that theme of getting to these places, because, I mean, yeah, we have to bring all this awesome equipment. We're not just there to camp and hang out. We need to, feed ourselves for, however long we're in the field. And we also need all the equipment to do the things we want to do. Ollie, one of the moments that has, I think, scarred me for life is moving gear to Wedge Island. Some eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed there's a big old shed in the back of your video with a fridge in it to keep the food kind of safe, although there was a bit of mold. Walk us through, how do you get all your gear onto Wedge Island to live there for, a month?
Yes, well, with difficulty. The first time I actually went out there, we dropped a fridge in the ocean on the way home, luckily, and it was old anyway, and we got a new fridge with handles. But yes, so we get a big boat, but there's no unloading dock, there's no jetty, so we have to do shuttling between the big boat that we've brought everything on, including a semi-portable fridge, and jerry cans, so many jerry cans of water, onto this little dinghy, this little inflatable dinghy, and we have a sort of towing system. So the first pair go out, they paddle to shore, and then we set up this rope system. So the dinghy then keeps going between a few people on shore and then a few people on the boat, and we have to sort of stage by stage. And the worst day of every single trip to Wedge Island is that first setup day, because it's several hours. It's sort of a half an hour just to unload onto the coastline. And then you have to bring all of the heavy gear to the top of the rocks, which isn't that far, but it's still far. And then you have to walk it into the camp, which again isn't relatively too far, but the whole process sort of wipes it out of you. So you end up taking a break to maybe find some food from somewhere before you can then set up the camp. So that first day is always knackering. And then I love going home isn't too bad, because you have to take everything back with you, including that big gazebo and your tents and your equipment and everything. But the jerry cans at least are empty then. So you don't have to lug around 20-litre cans anymore, which is good.
Yeah, it sounds like, well, it was an effort because I remember it very well.
Yeah.
We have maybe 5 minutes left. So I might just ask one more question to Emiliano that's come into our question and answer. Says, hi, Emiliano, can't believe the quality of the cinematography for the content that you provided. Was it something you did personally, or was it best to get a professional in? This person works in marketing and sometimes thinks the most unexpected moments create the most beautiful content to share. So that all the film was you, yeah?
Yeah, 90%. Yeah, and he has a good point. It was definitely unexpected, like, because, well, I do a little bit of photography, but not a pro here, and the trick was just put a lot of lights and filming with this macro lens, and actually came out pretty cool. So it was definitely unexpected, and like took a little bit of trial. And I have to say that since I had the opportunity to go twice, the first time I went there and I had this opportunity to film some of them, and it didn't work so well. And the second time I figured out a little bit better a technique to film them, so it was actually fun. But the point is, like, anyone can do it, just grab a camera and film, and that's it. So yeah. If you have the time, that's the best option.
I really like that as a closing remark, Emiliano, that if you've got a camera, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's a camera phone, GoPro, or whatever hectic AUV you were using down in Antarctica. I mean, all this stuff tells those stories, and you can tell them in whatever unique way you like. So I think that's a really beautifully put way to close off this short film festival. I'd like to thank everybody for their interest. I'd like to thank our wonderful videographers, producers, directors. I mean, you really all did quite a lot to get those films produced. So just a reminder that these films are available as part of a video library maintained by AMSA and AMOS. And I think some of the films are even online on YouTube as they are as well. So if you had a favorite and want to watch it again immediately after, make sure you remember its title and go search that into YouTube. So thank you again, Leslie, and our filmmakers. And thanks for the opportunity to participate in National Science Week. That's happening for the rest of this week. So make sure you check out the National Science Week online brochures to find out what's happening around Tasmania for you. Today's event will be available as soon as possible as a video and podcast via the Island of Ideas website, which is now on your screens. Catching a talk on one of your favorite topics has never been easier, at home or in the office, or maybe even in the field. And the series continues with the upcoming talks, also now on your screen. Island life may have changed a little, but the University of Tasmania is looking forward to keeping the ideas flowing. Thank you so much for taking part in this event, and have a great evening.
Thanks to you, Peter. Great MC and great video too.
Thanks, Amelia.
Thanks, Peter, and everyone. Thank you.